Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, I just want to say a little bit about this book, and I think this is as holy book as Bhagavad Gita. This is about devotees who are practicing, trying to live Bhagavad Gita, and it is a compilation of stories about. Yeah, it's actually Prabhupada had about 5,000 disciples. And about 1/3 of them were female, I think, like between 1,500 and 2,000. And some years back, some of them, they got this idea that they wanted to write down a document about Srila Prabhupada's exchanges with his female disciples. Ultimately, we are not this body, but still there may be some differences in how we exchange and like that. And it was especially Malati, Devi, Dasi, who is one of the early disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And the idea was that they were asking some questions. After so many years, your life is still reposed around Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Why? And what are your memories, and how has it changed your life? So they were kind of trying to contact all these Prabhupada disciples. Not all of them responded, but I think in this book there are about 300 small stories, and I will read some of them. And the first one is actually, I will read something from Malati Devi, Malati Prabhu, because she was actually one of the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada that came to Denmark. She came here back in 1969. She was one of the first devotees that came over from America to England, to London in 1968. And then she has told us that she was here in 1969 and distributing books. She doesn't remember much. I asked her one time, I met her in Mayapur, she doesn't remember much. You know her much better than I do. But they came over and distributed books here already in 1969, long before there was a temple here in Denmark. And she has written a quite long story, but I would focus on one kind of little bit famous story about some exchanges with her and Srila Prabhupada. And it was like she was also one of the first devotees that went to India with Srila Prabhupada. I think it was in 1972. And then, they were staying different places in India, but at one point she was staying in Mayapur, and she became Srila Prabhupada's cook. And she had a husband, Shamasundra, and she also had a small baby, Saraswati. She was a couple of years at that time. But at the same time, she was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And cooking for Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur at that time, that was quite some kind of, what do you call it? Difficult service, a kind of challenging service. But Malati, she's actually said that, it says that although she was a bit overwhelmed, she never had this stop sign. She was a very enthusiastic devotee, very nothing can stop Malati. But this was quite a challenging service for her. And she has described a little bit this service, what it means to cook for Srila Prabhupada. It's not just about going to the kitchen. It's like you have to, that's a whole, I'll try to read it for you. And the first thing on the list is she should take care of daughter and husband. And then the next thing, for cooking, she had to meet the treasure, to get funds for Srila Prabhupada's boga before anyone else visited him, to minimize the chances he would be in a bad mood and then argue over every paisa. So that was the first thing. And she explains, we had no personal funds most of the time, so if my daughter needed anything, I'd have to beg from the treasurer. She even had to beg to cook for Srila Prabhupada. She had to go and beg to the treasurer to get the money. And then I also had to beg and fight on behalf of Srila Prabhupada every day. One time the treasurer didn't want to give me rupees for a pineapple, which Srila Prabhupada really enjoyed. His reasoning was that he didn't eat the entire pineapple, therefore it was wasted money. So even in the service of Srila Prabhupada, there were sometimes different of opinions. And then she had to go to Bhaktistan, the road, and walk to the boat ghat, where the boat are going from Mayapur to Navadvip, and then have an argument with the men who were not connected with the boat but stood in paths demanding a toll. Those who have been in India know this kind of people, taking a toll for something like they just make up. It would have been a lot easier to give them a few paisa, but I didn't have enough money for anything beyond purchasing fresh bhog for Srila Prabhupada. Then she had to fight with the boat wala about the fare, and then being a Westerner, she says, I would get special mercy. Being poor, I fought back like anything. Even Srila Prabhupada once remarked in Bombay, only Malati should go shopping because she never gets cheated. And then the next thing, disembark on the other side of the river in Navadvip and endure another cheater trying to extract a toll to go up the embankment from the boat. Then she had to fight with a rickshawala about the fare to go to the sabji market, that's where you're buying the vegetables. And then she had to argue with the sabji wala over quality and prices. Then she had to argue with the fruit wala over quality and prices. And then she had to argue with another rickshawala over the return ride to the ghat, where the ferry goes. And then sometimes she also had to argue with the Misti Banda, the sweet shop, and where she was purchasing rasagula and Misti Dahi. And then when she came back, then she had to confront the fake toll collector on the Navadvip side to get from the boat and like that when she get off the boat. And then because I now had parcels and needed a rickshaw, then she had to fight with another rickshaw wala. Because they could say, oh, you had money, then you could. And then she explains sometimes she had her little daughter with her. And then she explained, if my daughter was with me, the entire situation intensified. I had to worry about her. Sometimes these rascals would try to separate us as a way to force me into giving more. So she really had something to fight, just to cook to Srila Prabhupada. And then, then when by the time she get back to the camp where they're staying in Mayapur, then she just had to start cooking. And something explained like that she had only 2 fires to cook with. One was a traditional small bucket lined with mud and dung, with a bars over the top to hold a pot or puff of a roti. Not so easy for a Westerner to use this kind of thing. And then there was another one, a kerosene stove. But a lot of time the Prabhupada servant, he would took one of the heaters to heat water for Srila Prabhupada. So sometimes she just had one stove to cook for Srila Prabhupada. And then she explains that one day after a particularly careful meditation effort to please Srila Prabhupada, a bit of pride crept in. I felt that day as I finally did my service very well. That mistaken idea did not last for long. Srila Prabhupada called me and asked, why so much salt? I was to include some salt, pepper, bits of chopped fresh ginger, and a slice of lemon on the side of his plate. At that moment, I suddenly felt defeated. I thought, I'm just not able to do this service properly. I can't give up being a wife or mother, but I could stop cooking. After all, I reasoned, I'm not able to please him no matter what I do, so it would be better to have someone who could do the service properly, be his cook. I began to feel some relief. I decided that the next day I would tell him that I would find someone else to cook for him. My burden lifted. I felt as if a big problem has been resolved. However, the next day did not go as planned. So she kind of decided this is enough. I'm going to ask Srila Prabhupada to find somebody else, or that tell him that I cannot cook anymore because it's not. There's so much austerity, it's difficulty, and then Prabhupada is not even satisfied. And then it turned out that some of his godbrothers were coming for lunch. Prabhupada was being criticized, among other things, for having a woman cook for him. I reasoned that he would not want me to cook that day, and therefore decided to tell him my plan the following day. Suddenly I heard my name called. Srila Prabhupada wanted to see me, wondering why I entered his kutia and made obeisances. Before I could even raise my head, I realized he was telling me that what he wanted for lunch that day. So this was not the right time to tell him that I was not going to cook anymore. So I just nodded my head in agreement, even though I was surprised. So she had that plan, but plans sometimes changes, especially in front of Srila Prabhupada. Many examples of that. So then she explains the godbrothers, they were seated inside the Srila Prabhupada when I finished cooking. As I came to the less than elegant burlap sack curtain, it was Prabhupada staying in some kind of tent, like that in the beginning of Mayapur. There was not all these buildings, there was just some tents and some huts and like that. So Prabhupada was sitting there in this tent, and then at the back end of the kutia that served as the servants' area, and she explained that she was like kind of peeking in like that. It was simply spectacular. The little kutia was not well lit, so it was usually very dim inside. On this day it was luminous. Srila Prabhupada was at the end of the room, flanked by 3 or 4 of his godbrothers, who were venerable, elderly Vaishnava gentlemen. But the entire attention was on Srila Prabhupada, and he appeared as if he were a rare diamond in an exquisite setting. You see, a diamond on its own is undoubtedly gorgeous, but when it is put into a proper setting, its natural beauty becomes even more enhanced. That was how Srila Prabhupada appeared to me at that moment. I became very much intimidated to enter. I pulled my sari completely over my head. I went down on my knees and elbows, pulling the sari even over my arms. Only my hands were exposed, holding his thali. In this way, I crawled in, using my knees and elbows for support. I put the plate down and made ground-level obeisances and began to retreat, slithering out the same way I had entered on my knees and elbows. So she was trying to be very kind of humble in the presence of Srila Prabhupada and his godbrothers. Then she says, suddenly I heard his voice. Yes, she cooks for me, and I criticize her. And then there was a pause, and then he said very seriously, but she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. So then she had some thoughts after that. My foolish mistaken attitude was immediately adjusted. Immediately I clearly saw how he had been reciprocating with my desire to perfectly please him, and I also knew that I had foolishly taken his words as criticism. That was a wonderfully humiliating discovery. I realized that I was being used as an example in this situation. While it appeared as if he were referencing me, he was really talking about the unique relationship that existed between himself and his disciples. I was just a fortunate example. His amazing words were meant for all of us, telling his godbrothers in no certain terms of the mutually loving relationship between him and his disciples. I had no further thought about quitting. The next day was like all the others, except that instead of feeling beaten down and oppressed by the various battles, I felt exhilarated by the opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada. I couldn't believe my former foolish mentality and how perfectly Srila Prabhupada had exposed and smashed it. Now each argument was completely ecstatic, beginning with the treasure to the final rickshawala. I felt as if I was flying with my feet on the ground. I just loved this service, and my love for Srila Prabhupada increased along with it. Our good fortune knows no limits. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I would like to read another story with one very dear disciple of Srila Prabhupada that many, at least some of you know her, Narani Mataji. She has been here in Denmark many times. She started to come here about 20 years ago. And we used to meet up with her in a summer house with a group of ladies, and she was doing some seminars and classes, and then we'll go to the beach together, and it was do kirtan together. It was very, very sweet. So we feel very fortunate to have had her association here. And I actually think she's coming in this year in August. Yeah. She hasn't been here for some years. So it says here that Narani first met Srila Prabhupada when he came to Gainesville, Florida in July of 1971. She had been initiated for 1 month. So sometimes disciples, they would get initiated, even Prabhupada was not present, they would get initiated by mail. But the mood was so strong that they feel this, even without meeting Srila Prabhupada, they wanted to surrender to him. And this is actually also what is going on in ISKCON nowadays, because most of us here haven't met Srila Prabhupada personally. But still we feel that kind of inclination to serve him. When she walked behind him, what struck her most was a sense of belonging, security and safety. She felt she could follow Prabhupada for the rest of her life. When Prabhupada initiated me by letter in June of 1971, he'd given me important instructions. He wrote, "Yes, now that you have come to Krishna consciousness, your spiritual life, the real life has begun. First birth is from your parents, but real birth, real life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master and renders service unto him. Then the path is open for going back to home, back to Godhead, to live eternally in full knowledge and full bliss and in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Lord Krishna. That is the goal, and the means to attain it are simple. You should strictly follow the regulative principles, chant at least 16 rounds of beads daily, read and study all our books, attend aritis, and go for street sankirtan. In this way, be engaged in Krishna's business 24 hours, and your rapid advancement in Krishna consciousness will be certain." So that was a letter from Srila Prabhupada at her initiation. And then she explains, "After my husband and I had been devotees in the US for a year and a half, Prabhupada asked for 50 devotees to come to India. Shatarupa, our temple president, told my husband and I that he was sending us to India. During our first 7 years in India, my husband and I were Radha Govinda's pujaris in the Calcutta temple. I was offering Mangalati, the 12 o'clock arati, the 4 o'clock arati, and the evening arati, and I was dressing the deities, putting them to rest, making garlands, taking care of tulasi, and sewing. We made 52 deity dresses. I'd also go out and collect. I stepped for 4 hours, and the conditions were austere, devotees getting malaria. And then there's one incident with Srila Prabhupada. Once when I was offering the ghee lamp during Mangalati, I turned around and Prabhupada was 4 inches behind me. I was so shocked, I almost dropped the ghee lamp. I didn't know what to do. Should I offer the ghee lamp to him from his feet up? I don't remember what I did, but I thought, wow, I should think that Prabhupada is right behind me, watching every move I make for my whole life. Very nice meditation to think that Srila Prabhupada is always like so close to us. In India, Prabhupada didn't discriminate between men and women. Women did deity worship in Bombay, Delhi, Hyderabad and Calcutta, in every ISKCON temple in India except Mayapur. Women were doing all kinds of services, cooking, harinam, leading bhajans, preaching, purchasing deities for the temples. It was innocent in those days, informal and friendly, like a family. God brothers and God sisters were so enthusiastic to chant and preach, so dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. We never thought about mixing together improperly. The feelings we had toward each other were not one of hatred, or inferiority or superiority, but of mutual respect. I joined because we all felt that Srila Prabhupada was our common father. So they also often explain a little bit how they felt about the culture in ISKCON at that time. I saw Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan in 1972. Every day after his evening lecture, he would pack into his small room for darshan. The first thing he said was, "Don't associate with the Babajis. It's called Marikata Vairagya." Marikata means monkey. Just like the monkeys, they are renounced. They wear no clothes. They are vegetarian, but they have many wives. One monkey, 20 wives. So don't associate with the Babajis. At another darshan, a monkey ran into the room, grabbed some bananas, and ran out. Srila Prabhupada said, "See how intelligent he is. None of you would dare to do that. But the monkey is intelligent for eating, not for other things." Once in a darshan, he said to me, "My sister Pishima told me that you speak Bhagavatam very nicely." I was bewildered because I had never spoken Bhagavatam in my life. What was he talking about? Then I remembered that Pishima was present on Janmastami when I read the Rasa Lila chapter from Krishna book. She didn't speak English, but I got into the reading and she got into the mood and cried. So even she didn't understand, she kind of got into the mood. As Srila Prabhupada's sister Pishima, she was also very great devotee. She was very attached to her brother, Srila Prabhupada. Pradyumna knew me from Boston, and when he saw me in Calcutta in 1973, he said, "Do you want to come to Mayapur with Prabhupada?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "Learn how to read Bengali. We are leaving tomorrow. We want you to type the Chaitanya Charitamrita for Prabhupada." He gave me a Bengali book, and I learned. Okay, the first building in Mayapur, the Lotus building, was being built even while we lived in it. There were no windows and the doors didn't close. Prabhupada liked to see what the devotees were doing. And when he looked in the window of my room, I was sitting with earphones, listening to a recording of him speaking Bengali verses and typing the English transliterations with a huge Bengali book in front of me. Prabhupada said, "Oh, you know Bengali?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada," although I just learned the alphabet the day before. Then Srila Prabhupada called me into his room and asked me to learn how to type in Bengali script on a Bengali typewriter. Then he said that we would do many books together. His words were prophetic, because 30 years later I started writing books by Srila Prabhupada's inspiration. I wrote Srimad Bhagavatam at a glance, which has a picture for every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, and a Bhagavad Gita at a glance. Within 2 months in Mayapur, I typed Adi Lila chapters 13 to 17. Then I returned to Calcutta to become the head pujari there. Once in Gita class in Calcutta that Prabhupada was giving, we were studying 9/11. I chanted the verse from memory. Prabhupada, surprised and happy, gave me a look that I'll never forget. Like, "Wow, you know the verse. Anybody know the Bhagavad Gita 9/11? You know." It's kind of a famous verse. Because we couldn't manage things well in India, Prabhupada often stepped in. Once he became our GBC, another time our temple president. He was also our temple commander, telling us to clean this and that. When the deity Gilam was dirty, he angrily said to me, "Who has done this?" I was shaking. I wanted to disappear into the floor, but I couldn't, because I was face to face with Prabhupada. Sometimes we had to take it from him. Another time, after he had taken darshan of Radha Govinda, Prabhupada was appreciative. He thanked my husband and me. While we were offering our obeisances after that, a sannyasi told us, "Be blessed." Then I felt, I got Prabhupada's blessings. My life is perfect. The next day, though, I understood that I have to try to get his blessings every day. If we were hesitating, afraid in our spiritual life, Srila Prabhupada would push us to take the next step. That's the quality in him I most appreciated. Can you follow what I'm reading? Is it clear? Yeah. I myself find these stories extremely interesting. The next one I want to read is Shatarupa Devi Dasi. How many of you heard about Shatarupa? You know her. She is one of the few Danish Prabhupada disciples, and she was most of the time she joined in France, and also I think she met the devotees also in England, but she joined in France, got initiated there, and so we didn't know her here in Denmark for many years, but she was actually here 20 years ago. She took part in our Raja Yatra Festival of India that time. Maybe some of you remember. But she also have a very interesting story. Before she became a devotee, she was Miss Denmark. And then she was a famous photo model. So it says, after becoming Miss Denmark, Shatarupa went to London as a model. And 3 months later, when she was 22, she was on the cover of Vogue and other major magazines. Vogue, is it called Vogue? Vogue? She modeled all over the globe for 3 or 4 years. She was very famous. I was going out with a famous photographer who knew George Harrison and started chanting Hare Krishna. So that's kind of through George Harrison and this photographer friend. Then she started chanting Hare Krishna. And she said, chanting Hare Krishna, why not let me chant Hare Krishna? I also became a vegetarian. But since this photographer was taking drugs, I left him. I didn't like drugs. Then she explains, once I went alone to the manor, Bhaktivedanta manor, I sat in a darshan, and when Prabhupada asked any questions, I asked, this is a question, Shatarupa, she was asking Srila Prabhupada in a darshan. If we are all spirit souls, how come we are born as men and women? Looking at me nicely, he said, desire. That word desire went into my heart and allowed me to understand. I said, thank you very much. In the corridor after I left Prabhupada's room, I burst into tears and cried like a mad woman in separation from Prabhupada. That day I got beats. In the summer of 1973, by chance I visited the Paris temple while Prabhupada was installing Sri Sri Radhapari's Isvara. From the Vyasasana, Prabhupada looked around, saw me and said, beatback. Nice. He acknowledged my beatback. I listened carefully during his lecture, trying to find some faults with what he said, but I couldn't. It was all too good to be true. Sometimes devotees, they kind of try to find some faults in Srila Prabhupada, like, in order to not surrender. But it's difficult to find fault in Srila Prabhupada. I loved prasadam and soon started happily making Krishna's garlands. After a while, Bhagavan said, why don't you give up modeling and move in? I said, yeah, why not? I called my agent, called Johnny Casablanca. He came to the temple and said, I've lost a lot of girls, but I never lost one to God. You have 2 months of solid bookings. You can't do this. I said, yes, I can. I'm working tomorrow. Cancel the rest. He said, please. I said, no, I'm finished. So that was the end of her career, at least for some time. Later she did some modeling again to collect for the temple. A couple of days later, Prabhupada went to Geneva, and I went with Prajata to help cook. Yogeshwara said, Srila Prabhupada, this is Anne. She's a famous model and Shaufus. And he went on and on. Prabhupada was looking right into my eyes, and with my eyes I was trying to tell him, I'm not a famous model anymore. I gave it up. I'm a devotee now. Please don't listen to him. When Yogeshwara finally stopped, Prabhupada, looking like a 5-year-old with twinkling eyes, a beautiful lit-up face and a fantastic smile, said, Chant Hare Krishna. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, and fell on the ground. I lived in the temple and did my service, and sometimes I think, I was famous. Why doesn't the press come and ask me what I'm doing? When they didn't come, I thought, forget it. I'm not here to talk to the press. I'm here to serve Krishna. And then the press came. Paris Match, newspapers from America, Denmark, India. Paris Match did a nice interview and put me on the cover with the lead article, She Left Everything for Krishna. Bhagavan showed the article to Prabhupada in Bombay, and for a week Prabhupada showed it to all his guests, saying, she gave up everything for Krishna, you should do the same thing. That's Prabhupada. He often, when he got some news articles, that time there was no internet, so when there was some news articles in newspapers and devotees, they would clip it out and send it to Prabhupada, and he would often use it in his preaching and showing to his guests and live members and like that. And then Prabhupada told Bhagavan, this must be something that she has heard from Bhagavan, that Prabhupada told Bhagavan, right now she's a little bit of a Maya Devi, but later on she'll do some tangible service. I hope that tangible service is coming now. I don't have any great powers, and I don't know what to do or where to do it, but I pray that Krishna and Prabhupada will inspire me. I'm ready to go wherever Krishna wants and to do whatever he wants. I want to do some tangible service. So I think time is running out. And there are many more stories that I would like to share with you, but I think we can do it another day. And also I recommend, if you would like to read this book, you can get it in different, I can actually order it on ISKCON or some stores. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. And I think are we ready? Are we finished?
Maybe, I don't know, this one.
Maybe we have little time.
Little time. Okay. Should I find, maybe, I don't know if there's a short one. Maybe you can just, as a small little story I could read.
Can I ask a question? Have you met some of these devotees?
Please repeat it for the...
If I have met...
Yeah, serve them?
Please repeat it.
Yeah, I mean, those devotees, like I have met Malati in Mayapur, and I haven't done specifically service for her, but I've like kind of, I talked with her and also asked her about this, if she had remembrance here from Denmark. And then of course Narani, she was here. And Shatarupa, yeah, she was here, and we actually made, when she was in Copenhagen for the Festival of India 20 years ago, we made an interview with her also, and we have it in our magazine. I just read it again. It's actually quite interesting, like, because she kind of, she was in a temple for some years, but then she got married, she got a child, and then at one point she left the temple because she didn't feel that she could take properly care of her child in the temple. So she kind of moved out and like started to do some work outside. But I think she always like kind of kept that connection to Srila Prabhupada. But as you said, it's a very great opportunity to have met some of these devotees and also to serve them. And I also think as long as some of them are still here on this planet, we should try to take as much advantage of that as possible. Also, when Narani Mataji is coming, you should take very nicely care of her and inquire from her and serve her and like that. Get benefit from her association. It's very important. Yeah. There's a small story. It's kind of actually a small pujari story. It's by one Ksama Devi Dasi. I think she's from England, but she was a pujari. And then I'll just read a very small story. She was an altar. One time we had this huge flower vase. It was almost as big as the deities, maybe 2/3 as tall. It was put in between Radha and Krishna, and Srila Prabhupada said it should be moved. He explained that nothing ever becomes between Radha and Krishna. There's a famous picture of Radha and Krishna, and there's a cow in the middle. But Prabhupada said that's not bona fide because nothing becomes between Radha and Krishna, not even a cow. So that was also like Prabhupada, he was always instructing his devotees in so many details. And this is one example from the altar. I think this is from London. They have this Radha Krishna deities. And of course they would always put vases and flowers and like that, but you shouldn't put the vases in between Radha and Krishna. So. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, finish for now. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada's daughters ki jai.
Dandaniti Mataji ki jai.